tomorrow is the last day to vote early in person.
So I just asked a woman if I could interview her. She said no. And she kind of smiled and said, be careful.
Every year during election year, Philadelphia is kind of like a very uncomfortable time. It's starting to become more of a fear-mongering.
We could go probably into a war anytime.
It scares me that he wants to be a dictator from day one.
They hate Trump and they want to kill babies.
They want the baby parts. They want the money laundering and Planned Parenthood.
Everything about our democracy is at threat.
When people are in a state of fear, their thought processes are different.
This country's falling apart, I hate to say.
If Trump were to be reelected, I'm honestly afraid for our country.
I think the Democrats will do whatever they have to keep in power.
And people don't know how bad it is. That's the problem. They don't know.
Hello, Pennsylvania.
Glad to be back in Pennsylvania.
I was very much a Democrat, very much not looking at any policies, just go vote Democrat. And then I think 2016, that debate between Hillary and Trump when she asked about his taxes, and he told us, like, yeah, I'm cheating. And so is everybody else.
All your friends take the same advantage that I do, and I do.
So my generation, I think the men are like mostly Trump in my age bracket.
But I hope Kamala's stick to her word, because that's who I'm voting for. Trump, he raising taxes. Us minorities don't have anything. And then he wants to cut Social Security off. Our seniors work their whole lives so they can have something for their families to build up. That ain't right.
Trump ain't shit.
He sure ain't. We gonna give her a chance, because we need a female in office.
And they doing for the rich people before they even doing for the poor people. Everybody human, you know? Everybody deserves a chance.
I see around here there's a lot of support for Trump.
Well, we're conservative. Of course, we're against abortion. We're against handouts. You teach your children to work for what they have. As Christians, we don't look at our leaders for a savior.
Good evening, Detroit.
We are with President Trump to make America great again through peace and justice for all.
Both the parties aren't great for our community. They're mostly not with Kamala because of what Biden has been doing, and they haven't been supporting that. He's been losing all the Democrats. So yeah, they're mostly all going to Trump, but I wouldn't trust either. There's a lot that are going to third parties.
Maybe I'm gonna vote, but I'm gonna go to a third party.
They have relatives in the Middle East. All of them are suffering from the politics coming from our government here.
Trump was saying he has some peace in the Middle East. That's why a lot of candidates from here are going to Trump. The community just wants to stop the war, and they want to stop all the funding from the USA to Israel. They want to stop all the funding and all the weapons that are going there. And they just want peace.
A lot of people in this country are against Israel for some reason. I think if Kamala gets in, I think she would cut their aid eventually. I might be wrong. I don't think Kamala will stick up for Israel like Trump would.
But I know there's a lot of people around here. I would say 95% of them there are Trump.
I know very few people who are not voting for Kamala.
Another reason why we need Trump, he knows how to deal with his people, and he makes friends with them because he makes peace. He makes wealth and progress for America. So why can't people see that?
We see migrants all over the place. We see increased crime in the suburbs of Philadelphia. It's not just the cities. It's not just a border. Every state's a border state now.
I don't go out at night anymore to my, neighborhood food store because I'm looking like this and looking like that. And so I just stay home and go when I can.
They drop the illegals off in buses all over the county.
You've seen that?
Yeah.
This is where democracy is at stake. If we do not get people out to vote, enough people in the right direction, we could lose our democracy. And so that's why we're out here. But
people just watch 3 channels, and that's all they know. They don't really know what's going on. That's very sad. And they get all the information, and it's all about how bad the Republicans are. They don't tell you all the good that Trump does. They don't tell you all the good things he does. They're always digging up stuff, Every one of them has skeletons in their closet. I mean, they all do. Come on. I don't care if a man has a mistress. I don't care what he does. If you know how to run the country.
Extremely concerned about Roe v. Wade. Worried about,
the woman in this country.
I think it's safer for the future generation of women in America if the man who didn't try to appoint judges to overturn Roe v. Wade was elected.
When you take the abortion away and you take the medical right in our body, like autonomy away, it's just like the societal norm of women's values gets belittled.
There's now nowhere in this country you can't go to have an abortion, so that shit's right off the table there.
I am here to support women's rights. It's our bodies. It's like the world is currently on fire.
Protect abortion rights, protect the right to form a union.
People understand what's at stake, so like not only for themselves, but thinking of the greater majority in this race.
It's a lot of our first times voting, and I'd like to be able to do that again.
She's not Trump, which I love. I don't like the idea of Russia expanding. It's kind of scary.
I think I'm worried about the outcome. If Trump doesn't get in, will they retaliate like they did prior at the state building?
Most of the country love Trump because he's helping us.
I understand that he's very appealing to a lot of people, but it's the policies that I'm concerned about.
Guys, welcome back to the Proper Thieves podcast. We're joined by Nathaniel Mayberg again. Nathaniel has gone off and become an independent journalist. And we're going to talk a little bit about his work in journalism and the results of the election. Today's date is the 18th or the 19th?
19th.
Yep. So we're about 2 weeks post-election right now. Currently, Trump is forming his cabinet picks, and we're in the interim of election and inauguration. So, Nathaniel, how you been, brother?
Fantastic. It's been quite the adventure since last time we spoke.
What an election, huh?
Crazy.
So tell us what got you into this journalism path.
Sure. So, like a lot of people, I've lost all faith in the mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
And I turn to WhatsApp, mainly WhatsApp and Telegram groups, especially being in Israel. That's where we get a lot of our updates on what's going on. And going about my daily life, it was good just to be in the know. And one day, it was about 5 months ago, there was an attack in the north of Israel. The 12 Druze children were killed on a soccer field. A missile from Lebanon came and hit. And the propaganda machines on both sides, once I dove into it, immediately went to work and just pumped out the narratives. And especially on Telegram, you're seeing these absolutely horrifying pictures. And then there was a narrative being run that Israelis, we stand with the Druze, which I have no issue with. But when I saw that I was being told that I stood with a group of people, for some reason it hit me that the media was commoditizing them. The alternative media was using this tragedy as a way to push a narrative. And how is Israel going to respond? Escalation. What is Hezbollah going to do? They're not admitting responsibility, this, that. And I'm like, who are these dead children? You skipped the whole part about dead kids. You showed me pictures. You got your clip. You got your likes. But where's the story here? And it hit me in the gut in a way that it hadn't ever before. And my mentor, because I have a full-time tech job, I do marketing. And I'm still at the company I was at last time we spoke. And I called my mentor who worked in news media, and I shared with him my thoughts. And he goes, yeah, that's where journalism has gotten to. It's sensational, and largely old school journalism is dead. And we got to work. A few days later, we had a brand guide, figured out who we were, what our values were, what our mission was. And this was when Iran, I think it was April, was threatening to attack. And is this going to escalate into a regional war? Is this World War III? So we said, all right, we got to start right now. I bought a GoPro and I hit the streets. Didn't know when Iran was going to attack. So I went super hard, collecting as many interviews as I could. Started in Tel Aviv. I ended up dressing up as ultra-Orthodox, and I went to the ultra-Orthodox city called Bnei Brak. It's about 30 minutes outside the city. I made my way into their community, interviewed people there, went up north to the Lebanese border, Syrian border, spoke to people who are under constant fire. They have anywhere from 0 seconds to a minute and a half, generally 15 when a siren goes off. So getting the perspective of people that are under pressure like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to the West Bank to get the Palestinians' perspectives. And in the old city of Jerusalem also spoke with Palestinians to get a sense of how they feel and what their perspective is on it. And I had my mind fairly blown many times. There were perspectives that I didn't know were possible. And I fell in love with the process of journalism and connecting and meeting people and sharing the information. And my mentor, who's very hard to please, said I'm really good at it. So we've been pursuing it further. And with the election, we said, all right, this is going to be my first like real test to get a story. We have 2 weeks. Let's see if you can throw me in the field, just head into the field and come up with things. Walked away with 14 hours of footage, which we can into that 6-minute video. And we think people that watch the video wouldn't be too crazy election nonetheless, but wouldn't be too surprised by the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it like talking to the Americans on both sides of the fence?
It was interesting. What I found, really my main conclusion, my main finding, what I observed was that Kamala ran a campaign with a vague promise on something about abortion. What it was, no one really ever went into. They just would refer to Roe v. Wade and rights getting taken away. That has been a full administration since that happened. So and then everything else, essentially, almost everything else was not Trump. Here's what Trump's going to do. The democracy's under attack. You saw the students that girl thought she might never vote again.
Mm-hmm.
And specifics of that, I could never really, very few. I got something out of a few people. Things along the lines of declaring a state of emergency, martial law, firing the government for how he would become this dictator. And that was what they ran. That was what this campaign was on. And then Trump's campaign was a movement. It was a cohesive culture. People generally could have more in-depth conversations, could elaborate a lot more on what the policies were that they supported. And there was a real passion. And the passion that I saw was less on Donald Trump and more on his vision for America. It was really about make America great again, became something that was almost felt, talking to these people, that was almost bigger than Trump himself. It was something that they could be involved in. They all dress the same. They have the chance. When I went to a Trump rally, didn't make it into the video, but the amount of times they would break into, USA and make America great and just different chants was something I didn't experience when I went to the Obama rally. And that was the main finding I saw.
Did you? I would agree with that. It did seem like one side was very issue focused, future focused, and really seeking to uproot corruption and stopping war, ending miscellaneous spending. And then the other side was more based on low information voters and kind of almost a deceptive tactic of women's rights and the fear of a dictator. But it seemed like a lot of rehashed arguments from 2016 and whatnot. Did you notice when you were talking to some of the more diehard Kamala supporters, like a cognitive dissonance when you started to push a little deeper on issues or talk about policies and whatnot?
So here's the interesting thing that I found. The people that I spoke to that loved Kamala as a figure were the ones that couldn't elaborate as much on the policies that they're afraid of and where they see her taking the country. the ones I spoke to that aren't a huge fan of Kamala, and some of them had issues with how she was appointed to be the candidate, they were the ones, in my experience, that could actually talk much more in depth about where they see the country going, where they want it to go. And I found that to be fascinating. In a way, it made sense.
Almost like just like the diehard fans of the person themselves and not really caring about their specific policies. Did you see that on both sides? Like just people that are diehard Trump, not really caring about the policies, kind of a middle ground where they look more at the policies of both sides, and then just diehard Kamala, whereas they're a pretty mixed group of them both, or did it skew to one side or the other?
No, so there were definitely Trump supporters that it's not so simple, because it wasn't just Donald Trump is a god or is this, it was Donald Trump will bring world peace. How? They had no idea. A lot around world peace. Japanese were saying he's the king, but they didn't really know English. But there were Japanese people, not American Japanese, just Japanese in front of his rally. Wild. I can send you those clips later. So it was always connected to a vision that has policy behind it. And that was definitely what I noticed for the Trump supporters. With Kamala, you said, was there a cognitive dissonance?
Yeah. So once you start presenting evidence or factual stuff, or, well, this actually is the policy, or this is what happened, or what right specifically do you mean, etc., then you start getting the pushback of, I don't want to hear anymore. This confronts my belief.
Okay. So in my interview style, I don't really get into debates with people. So there were times where I asked tough questions, and like someone brought up trust once, that she really trusts them. So I asked about Tim Walz lying or bending the truth on where he was when he was during his service. And there were times where there's kind of like a lot of people, and definitely there would be Trump supporters that, you kind of get something and you're like, oh, well, that doesn't really matter for that time. And it's politics, and that's something I was expecting. And but I heard it would usually, with the Kamala supporters, as I would poke deeper, it became about Trump.
Yeah.
Like just degrading, talking bad about it, like pointing fingers.
Fear. It was a very Kamala's campaign was a vague promise about abortion and fear mongering. That was what I gathered largely.
We're in a weird time where sometimes the most persecuted people are the most right or righteous. And when Trump burst on the scene, there was kind of the typical campaign of, oh, he's bad, she's bad, he's lying, she's lying. But as time went on, especially when he was out of office, the persecution continued to where they tried to impeach him after he was not a president. They tried to do what, and then it got to the point where they even did assassination attempts, 2, possibly 3. I heard the third one may have been kind of a dicey situation, but it almost seemed like the more of those attacks on him stacked up, I think people started to raise their eyebrow, like, why are they trying to silence this man so much? Why are they going out of their way in such a way that's so heinous? And it's not both ways. There were no assassination attempts on Biden or Kamala. There was, and I think that was a big indicator of something like they're trying to keep the good guy down, especially when you looked at the track record of the 2 presidents, Biden and Trump. Under Biden, we had all the COVID lockdowns. We had the wars pop off, and then immediately America starts funding these wars and not taking a position of peace. And that was an indicator, I felt like, too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm curious. Why you've referred to they, like they tried to assassinate Trump. Who do you speculate they is?
My personal belief is it's probably whoever these deep state people are that kind of pull the strings of both parties. They call the Democrats the the neocons, the neoconservatives, kind of the warmongering, and then you have the deep state on the Democrat side, the pro lockdown, the pro war, pro censorship. And I think whatever those powers that be, these kind of shadowy figures behind the scenes, I think they were the ones that wanted to keep Trump out purely because he's not from their system. And they're fearful of letting somebody come in that from the outside, and not only coming from the outside, but come back in from the outside that now is very familiar with the bullshit and the bad faith actors and the corruption.
Do you think if someone who has more political history was appointed as the nominee on the Republican side, that there would have been these assassination attempts?
I think, for example, like let's say if Mike Pence got the nomination or Nikki Haley, I don't think any of that stuff would have happened. I think the more the traditional, Mike Pompeo's, oh, I can't remember his name, the Mormon dude who ran. But no, I don't think so. I think anybody within the club, regardless of what side they're on, that wouldn't have happened to him. It would have been like George Bush versus John Kerry. They're both in the same fraternity, and it truly doesn't matter who wins. It's just, it's a coin flip. It's not a coin flip. It's just these are both our guys. It doesn't matter. This is just a dog and pony show at this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's consistent.
I think what's the way I view Trump is I view Trump as like an armor piercing missile, and the government is like this battleship. And for us to get the good guys inside to storm it and start taking back control of our government, we need something to pierce the hole and then allow all these other people to start filing in behind him, like the Viveks and the Elons and the RFK Juniors and the Tulsis and all these people that he's been appointing to cabinet positions, which is great. I think that was a brilliant campaign strategy to not just rely on solely the name Donald Trump, but to get as many people behind this cause versus just this man, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, right? Trump was a big Democrat supporter back in the day. Elon Musk, first term
Democrat.
Democrat, left, was appointed to be on one of the boards, left. Joe Rogan, definitely not a Republican. What makes
RFK Jr. was not a Republican.
RFK not a
Tulsi was not a Republican.
Like, how do you think it came to be that all these, like Trump went Republican to begin with? Republicans were these establishment people, or the people that are the swamp, got behind the guy saying, let's drain the swamp. And
I think the first time, I think he basically bullied his way in, elbowed his way in, and they were not expecting that. Because initially, Donald Trump had a lot of hatred from the Republicans, but he had a lot of support from the people. And they did not want him in. I mean, in the debates, everyone was saying he was incompetent, unqualified. He's not, his demeanor isn't presidential. He doesn't have the political background from his own side. And that was a kind of a telling thing, that he was kind of being stabbed in the back by his own party, so to speak.
Okay. And what do you think got him back for this second round?
I think part of it was just, oh gosh, there was the election fraud in 2020 that kind of got swept under the rug. There was all the stuff that happened with COVID. I think COVID was the biggest backfire in possibly, at least in our time in history, with them trying to push propaganda, false science, inaccurate treatment from masks to distancing to, and just there was just at the point where there was just so much evidence out there of, I want to say corruption, but just corruption at worst and just incompetence at best.
I was going to say, it's just like the pure incompetence of Biden throughout his entire,
yeah. And then
presidential,
for sure. And then we see the war with Russia and Ukraine pop off. And then immediately there's all this just we're just funneling money to Ukraine and no one's talking about peace. And then you start hearing these things pop up like Russia's trying to offer a peace deal. Russia's trying to make peace. There's actually a deeper story with NATO and there's a backstory. And none of that got really pushed in the mainstream. It was all this kind of independent journalism online. And I think there was just a switch in the minds of the people that they started to finally realize, hey, there's some fuckery afoot, and it's not adding up. My dollar's going way less further than it ever has before. They printed up trillions of dollars in COVID stimulus bills that went to businesses in foreign countries. They're spending all this money in Ukraine to fund a war that probably could be negotiated to peace. And then you find out that Biden hasn't even spoken to Putin during all this, or if he has, it was like cursory, and just the evidence just started to get so insurmountable that the typical low information voter started to see that like what I'm seeing in my day-to-day life with my own eyes is far different than what the news is telling me I should believe.
I also think that a big turning point was whenever Elon took over X, so you could really see the unfiltered opinions from both sides and make your opinion instead of just one side having their specific agenda that they're pushing and what is it called? Filtering off all the other radical opinions.
I also believe that the independent voters and then the Democrats played a huge role. It had gotten to a point where they had really corralled the population into like a 50-50 thing. And it's really good. It really did come down to these swing voters and people really taking a cold, hard look, not a cold, hard look, but just re-examining what is politics, what is governance, and why do I align with this party versus that party? What issues really are important to me? And I think the vast majority of Democrat voters are well-intentioned people that had their own good intentions used against them. They wanted things like support for the middle and lower class. They want peace over war. They want free speech over censorship. And then they started to see those values kind of get left behind or discarded. And a lot of more mature Democrat voters, I think, realized that they realized their values meant more to them than just the jersey they were wearing, what team is supporting, and I think guys like Elon and RFK really swayed a lot of people's minds, because those are respectable people that have a career of genuine work, upstanding work, people respect that.
There's no doubt that their efforts and Rogan's last minute endorsement was push men especially to get out and vote. One of the things I heard a lot was a concern that Donald Trump cozies up to these dictators. He's friends with Putin. And it's definitely true. He has a dialogue. And when I'd push back, as I try to do to everyone, that the classic wisdom of you should keep your enemies closer. There's a perspective that having a dialogue with the people you're not friends with arguably could be more important than having dialogue with people that you are friends with in a foreign policy perspective. So I'm curious what your view on Trump having these relationships with a Putin, with King Jong-un.
I think it's a necessary thing, at that level, to just say, you're my enemy, I'm not going to communicate with you at all, is the dumbest thing you can do.
I think it shows weakness.
How are you going to make peace if you're not even willing to sit down and talk?
Yes, exactly.
And I believe we're at a stage where most war is dictated in a boardroom, in a business meeting, and you want a sharp, tough businessman on your side that can negate war through treaties, tariffs, negotiations. And people that don't know how to do that, they're just gonna send bodies of people to die. And
do you think there's any line a leader can cross where there is no further room for negotiation? Complete annihilation is the only option.
there could be, but so much of this stuff is top secret national security that people like us will never. We're not flies on the wall in these meetings. We don't know truly what's going on.
Like, for example, right back in, say, World War II,
Mm-hmm.
there's Hiroshima,
Mm-hmm.
and Hitler killed himself or ran off to Argentina, whichever route you want to go. And then there was surrender. Right? There wasn't a let's sit down and negotiate. So do you see a difference between what's going on with Russia and World War II?
I think we're in an age where information is so much easier to disseminate. There was no internet in World War II. They had newspapers, radio, and I don't even know if they had television at that point.
Yeah.
But, if I was a guy in the 1950s and I hear on the radio the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor unprovoked, that's all that's all I know. I think we've come to find out that America dropped the second nuclear bomb after they knew they had surrendered. And we did it. We almost dropped that second nuclear bomb as just a show of dominance and power. Journalism is a very interesting topic because I think we're seeing a resurgence of journalism, I should say journalistic integrity. So back in the day, journalism used to be almost like a public servant, civil servant position where they not swore an oath, but there was an understanding of nonpartisanship where they present facts, ethics, they present data, and they don't let their opinions sway what they're saying. The idea is that we present information and let the viewers decide, almost like doctors. Our motto is to help regardless of who the patient is, what their beliefs are, what their race is, what their age is, sex, etc.
It was a noble profession. Just
it was a noble profession, exactly.
Noble.
And it was Hunter S. Thompson that kind of brought in the whole gonzo journalism movement to where I'm going to mix in what my beliefs in this. And it was revolutionary and interesting and fun and hip. And but somewhere along the line, journalism became like almost like an actor. Like, here's what you're going to believe. Here's what you're going to sway. Here's how you're going to sway the people. And it became like a very disingenuous profession, almost like the way COVID made doctors seem. Like, it was very like, you're just saying what you're told to say. You're not really
they're either
following the noble path.
Generally, what I've concluded is a lot of journalists these days are pundits or activists saying they're journalists. Because a lot of them just going out and giving their opinion. And a lot of them are fighting for a certain cause, and that's it.
You see it especially post-election on things like MSNBC, like when they caught that guy admitting that they intentionally dumbed down their viewers and they intentionally just are like a propaganda wing of the DNC and things like that. And you just see it in real time to where the stuff they say just seems like gobbledygook. It's not even true. And it's very emotionally driven. It's very disingenuously delivered rhetoric.
And I mean, you could see it like in all the mainstream media is like a specific agenda for a specific side. And I don't know if there's any truth to this, but I was talking to someone and they were saying that for Kamala's campaign, she raised like just over $1 billion or something like that. And Donald Trump's was like $500 million or $500 million or something like that. And Kamala ended her campaign like $10 million over what they had
$20 million
raised.
in debt.
Yeah. From paying all the celebrities and everybody to endorse her. And
paid endorsements.
Yeah. And Trump having half as much and still getting the amount of.
I think Kamala's campaign outspent Trump like 3-1.
Yeah.
Well, it was. I can't explain exactly how that much money was given. Right, it was given to them. It was donated fair and square. People went on the website and gave their own hard-earned cash. But it was interesting how they had, what was it, 15 weeks to organize and spend. So there are parts of me that aren't super shocked that their books were clearly not synchronized.
Mm-hmm.
Spending, how they decided to spend. Why did I listen to John Legend for 20 minutes at Obama's rally instead of him having double the amount of time?
Mm-hmm.
That was their decision. Conclude what you will about that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they had only 15 weeks. That had never been done before.
Yeah. I will give them props on that. Like having such a short amount of time and putting like a campaign together like they did. I will give them props on that. But I mean, the sheer volume of money that they spent just to have the outcome that happened.
Remember that scene in Joker where he just burns the money?
Yeah.
I feel like that's what the Democrats did. They just formed this huge pile of cash and burnt it for nothing. You know, it's
well, they fought. I thought that Kamala departing her departing address, I don't remember all of it. The one part that resonated with me where I actually believe she left a very positive message.
I did like her final speech.
I did too. I thought
it was heartfelt.
Yeah, where she said sometimes when you're fighting the fight, you don't win. And you have to keep fighting. And they fought so hard that now they're millions of dollars in debt.
Yeah.
And that might just speak to where their hearts were. And they said, we got to spend this money. We'll figure it out after.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people in Israel that went into tremendous debt doing things that they believed in.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just two lenses to look at that. It is quite ridiculous. At the same time, if the democracy was actually at stake, right? The same way I see the Palestinian activists, if there was truly an organized genocide occurring, I'm glad that there are people that are showing up this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's actually happening is like a whole other discussion to have, right? But in a reality where that's really what you believe, there's an element to that, at least that I respect there.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a vacuum like that. You hear what I'm saying?
It's a weird, but clearly they were the party that was trying to end democracy, with all the voter fraud and fighting to keep
on voter fraud. Let's dig into that a little bit.
All right.
There are a couple of things that I've noticed pop up, right? So there's the one, right, where it's like there are what was it, like 20 million less voters?
Yeah. Where did that go?
But if there's voter fraud, what happened this time?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think my hunch tells me that Trump's team put in a lot of measures to prevent that and watchdog that. And it was in 2020, it was such an unprecedented thing. Like nobody suspected that somebody would try to steal a presidential election on such a grand scope. And it was such a issue that I believe that they stood down to a degree or were unable to get these votes in somehow. And like many things, but just like COVID, all the inaccuracies, all the misinformation, it wasn't equally divided where some sources were making it seem worse than it was and some were making it seem less dangerous than it was. It was all in one direction. So same like these votes, it was all for Joe Biden. It wasn't like half and half or even sort of close. And
I mean, like I see narratives online where people felt like they went to sleep and Donald Trump had won and they woke up and saw all these votes.
Yeah.
And Biden was now the winner. And I've seen that that's how a lot of people felt.
Mm-hmm. And you can look at the voting trend, how it was like, you can see the two chart as the votes came in, Donald Trump was leading just a little bit. And then they closed it. And then around 3 a.m., there's a sudden spike of Biden votes, just enough to get the victory. And then it ends. And it was such an obvious, where do these 100,000 votes show up out of nowhere? And then, I've heard stories that many of the votes were like, they only had one name checked, like Biden. And they statistically say that's ridiculous. There's an option that's like a downvote line that says, I vote all Democrat, all Republican. And there was just so much information coming up of like, this is not accurate. These are not real people. These are not whatnot.
So when on the part with illegal aliens or people that aren't real, I heard a lot of it was targeted at California.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and tried to register to vote in California. I'm from Maryland, registered to vote. So I was like, all right, like people just keep kind of saying you can just vote. So let me see if I can register to vote. I couldn't because I needed an ID number. And they asked for social. So I didn't dig into it like too much. It wasn't like I'm not an investigative journalist that's just going into one little hole. And then I did a second thing, which was I registered to vote absentee, and they sent me the envelope. And then I didn't send it in, and I went in person to vote because I wanted to see theoretically could I double vote without obviously breaking the law, because that wouldn't be a federal crime. And against a lot of journalism ethics to find something out. So I went to see like what happens because I didn't vote, and I showed up, and they saw in Maryland, they saw that I had already in the system. It basically said I had voted. And so they asked me what's going on. And I said, I forgot to mail. I didn't end up mailing it in. I missed the deadline. And they said, okay. And they whipped out this whole thing. I had to sign a bunch of paperwork. Then they brought me to this like second area. It became like if I had already voted, I would have just ran. I really would have. I would have just bounced because it was very clear that they would have figured it out. Maybe in 2 weeks, maybe in 2 months, maybe in 2 years. But it was clear to me that at least the state of Maryland was really on top of, at least in that case, double voting.
I had a very weird experience with when I went to register to vote. So I registered to vote in Hayes County. That's where we live. And I went in early to register early, you know, before the election. There's a certain window you need to do. And then when I went to vote, they scanned my card and they're like, oh, you're not in the system. I was like, well, I filled it out. And so I had to, you know, wait for them to call these people. And they say, okay, well, after like 30, 40 minutes, they're like, okay, well, now you're back in. And so I give them my ID. They give me a little piece of paper with like a barcode. They scan the barcode. They're like, I've never seen this error before. This says barcode invalid. I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, what is this? I've never seen this. And so I was like,
state?
Texas. And so I was like, okay, well, look, I've been here over an hour. I need to go. So I came back another day and I told people, I was like, look, I came here last time and I got this weird barcode error. And the guy looks like, okay, well, no, you're in the system. Everything's good to go. I wait in line. I do my vote and the same thing happens again. It's like
an error.
And then they just have some kind of managerial override they can do. And I did that. And then I just got a piece of mail that says your voter ID was denied because your driver's license number was invalid. Your name is not in the DMV registration. Your birthday is not accurate. And I was like,
interesting.
What? Why is
Do you think that would have happened if you were a Democrat?
I don't know if it, well, so
do you think that has happened to zero Democrats?
Honestly, I don't even know if I'm a registered Republican or not. I don't know if I'm a registered anything. And I don't know why, if this is just me like falling through the cracks, but I need to call the department, the DMV, and find out like, why isn't my name, birthday, or driver's license in there? Because possibly the person just put the numbers in wrong, but then why would the guy look it up and see it correctly? Like, what is this? It was just a weird experience to say the least.
Yeah.
I still got my vote in.
Was your information was your information in the DMV?
Well, when the people were entering it, they said it was in, and I gave them my driver's license, which is current and accurate. And then I got this piece in the mail just the other day. And so I want to follow up on that and find out is there some kind of database error? Like, has my information been scrubbed or tampered with, or
you think it could have been just like junk mail or something?
No, because I mean, maybe, but I mean, it could be a phishing scam or something, but it was just odd that like I had this weird barcode error that no one had seen before.
Yeah.
And I mean, it probably would have been a common thing if it was like they're trying to target Republicans or Democrats, you know, but I don't, when I did my voter registration, they didn't ask me what my political affiliation was. So I don't think it was like a politically targeted thing. And I don't think it was like an Andrew Goldthwait targeted thing.
Yeah. Just like a unique situation or something.
Just a glitch.
Yeah.
So to circle back, you brought up journalism and where, how do you think coming out of the election, how do you think perception on mainstream news media and journalism has shifted,
Well,
if at all?
I think long form podcasts are one of the best ways to cut through months and years of propaganda stuff because in a relatively short amount of time, I mean 2 or 3 hours, you can hear a full interview with Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin, like with Tucker, Carlson and Vladimir Putin, and that can give you a much better picture of what this person is like, what their beliefs are. And I think that going forward, we're going to see a lot more of these political people sit down and do long interviews where people can really get a feel for who they are because old school, conventional media, television media, snippets of sound bites and pre-planned questions and 90-second segments, I think that's going to be a thing of the past.
Yeah. I couldn't specifically tell you if I've noticed a difference whenever it comes to like mainstream media specifically, because I don't watch any of it.
That's kind of the older generation. They really cling to this television.
Yeah.
news.
I mean, I've kind of adopted the bias that, I mean, it's pretty much not accurate information because it's been skewed one way or the other. So anytime I see a clip from a mainstream media, I just scroll right past it. I don't even bother to watch it. I more so consume independent journalism stuff.
What do you, when you see an independent journalist, like what do they do that and it earns your trust?
They ask questions that are not obviously skewed to one side or the other. They ask questions that get them to talk about their personal experiences, not even, like I said, adjusted to one side or the other. It's just their personal experiences living in America, living in this state, on this specific topic. It's not skewed to one side or the other.
And I think even if it is skewed, like Tucker Carlson talks about, like believing in God and being a Republican, but they don't have that very effective newsman anchor voice. And we are joined today by Nathaniel Mayberg. And, and we're starting to see that that's almost like a relic of the past. Everyone just thinks this is how I become a journalist. I act and speak this way and look at my suit.
We hear that. And like you said, it's like a way of the past and the way that media has gone and it being pushed to one side or the other. People hear that and automatically are like, this dude's lying to me about something. I think really with the independent journalists, it's more authentic, it's more real, it's a genuine conversation. And I think a lot of people can really cling on to that because it's more relatable. It just seems more trustworthy. Whether all of them are or not, I don't know. Yeah. But it just seems more trustworthy to me.
I think a lot of it is not necessarily the journalists. I think it's more the population. I think people are just slowly becoming more intelligent and less ignorant and more aware of deception. Their bullshit detectors are getting more finely tuned. And it's just kind of reached a tipping point to where most people can detect bullshit than maybe 10, 20 years ago.
Is there, when it comes to reporting, say, the future of conflict reporting, war zones, pieces like, things on something like the health department, what's going on with all these chemicals. How do you see, what would you like to see from independent journalists?
Well, I'll tell you what I'd like to see. So, the Doge department with Vivek and Elon, they announced that they're going to start doing a weekly podcast called a Dogecast, where they update the people on what they've done, what they're seeing, what they're doing. And I would love to see every cabinet member do that somewhere between every 1 to 4 weeks. Sit down and talk to the people, kind of like the old fireside chats, but tell the people, hey, this is what I do. This is what we're doing. If you're like the FBI director, you can't give all kinds of national secrets, but you can, there's certain stuff you can share with the public. And I think,
isn't that an updated form of propaganda?
I think propaganda is information used with kind of a malicious intent or a specific intent to dissuade people or steer them. I think true journalism is just simply presenting the information and kind of bringing people into the truth. And so I would say no, but I think
how is the government, there's got to be a difference though between the heads of the new government agency. First of all, I think it's great. It'd be great if the president would go on Instagram Live and just chat with the population. I think it's a fantastic idea. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see exactly what you're talking about, but wouldn't you see a difference between them doing it themselves and then them sitting down with someone who's independent
Mm.
and drilling
Like
them
being
with
interviewed?
2.5 hours?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Maybe it is a better solution to actually have them be interviewed by an independent journalist and not have necessarily a pre-planned agenda of what they're going to present to a degree. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious because it would. I wouldn't personally. I wouldn't. I'm a huge Elon fan. I'll just be transparent about it. I've read
I
his
think most
biography,
people are, you know.
and you'd be shocked.
Really?
You'd be shocked. People have a hard time believing that there's a billionaire that has good intentions and it's
Yeah.
completely self-serving, even if the companies are also very humanitarian forward. Like
Mhm.
Elon being completely self-serving based on what his companies are, electric vehicles going to space,
Yeah.
Neuralink,
Mm-hmm.
tunnels, like I don't know, from my
Flamethrowers, first and foremost.
Yeah.
um but it takes an exceptionally high level of character to on a consistent basis be admitting that if your things in your government administration isn't going well or mistakes that are being made.
Yeah.
And I know like my mission as a journalist is when I speak with people to make sure to go into those, to ask those questions, not to
Mhm.
back people in the corners. But you've seen with you guys, I've been like, hold on a second, let's dive into that.
Yeah.
And I hope like my intention is never to make anyone look bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean
And
that's a sign of intelligence is how good your questions are. And there's thought-provoking questions and there's, you know, like I think Joe Rogan asked really good questions.
Yeah.
I think his interview with Donald Trump was great.
There's a difference between somebody asking questions to get a specific answer and then somebody asking questions just to get
Like a gotcha.
yeah.
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 yeah, it's called a leading question.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Asking leading questions.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the public waking up to propaganda in general was a huge turning point in our culture. And it unfortunately took being deceived for a little bit, or maybe a lot of it, you know, but um the best thing that can happen for the country is the people to wake up and to be a little bit more informed and self-policing. The worst thing that can happen to us is to go into that sleepwalking mode to where they just don't care. They go by very superficial. They just say, "Well, I'm a this party, that party. I'll just do that." You know.
Trump was a super polarizing figure,
Mhm.
right? Came in, hey, we're going to build a wall. Mexico is going to pay for it.
Mhm.
Started calling out and all this, the government, Washington, and all this stuff. And that's kind of what pushed a lot of this revolution, you could say, forward. But he's going to be out of the game in 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's going to be old. He's going to be undoubtedly old.
Yeah.
I see that guy going down hot. Like he's just going to die. Like he's just going to drop one day. But what I'm curious from you is how do you think this type of you could say alertness perhaps will continue without the figurehead being involved the way he is?
Well, I think it's kind of like we talked about with the Democrats kind of reevaluating their what their core beliefs are. I think it people need to remember what the idea of the movement was. You know, this truth seeking, pro free speech, pro peace, pro efficient, pro, you know, anti corruption. I think it's more going to lie in the hands of the people retaining those beliefs and going forward.
In my experience covering and speaking, there's a lot of things that everyone, I'd say more things than not, both sides want similar things, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one I spoke with wants to kill babies.
Yeah.
No one I spoke with wants there to be crime from illegals. No one wants inflation to be high and cost of living.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of things that could be aligned on. and that both sides didn't think they were responsible for. So do you see there being that reflection that the Democratic Party with the loss that they had? Do you see any politicians going that
I
way?
The mayor of New York, what's his name? He's been giving some interviews, and he seems like he kind of got betrayed by his party, and then he immediately started to have a little bit of a different public opinion. I think there are going to be some Democrats that see the trend that, hey, people are starting to be more truth seeking. They want more authenticity. They want more transparency. And they're not just as concerned with their party winning. And I think there's going to be some just diehard party loyalists that will just stay on that sinking ship like the Titanic, playing their violin until they drown to death, you know. Um, it'll probably take a couple generations, you know.
Yeah, I hear that. I saw AOC actually removed her she her
Yeah, I saw that.
for a day.
And she put it back because she got.
And she was asking her followers because she's like, who's a Trump supporter, and she was trying to figure out why. So
Yeah.
I was kind of impressed with.
Yeah, I think if they want to succeed, they're going to have to really listen to the voice of the people and the will of the people versus tell the people what they should say and think and believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's and as you notice, the Democratic Party took a very strong anti-First Amendment position, like John Kerry and these guys and Hillary Clinton, and that is very scary because without freedom of speech and without freedom of information, you just don't know what is true. You don't know what to believe.
Yeah.
And then they really have a stranglehold on the democracy.
Yeah. Right. Well, the Second Amendment's there to defend the first.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Do you think the people you mentioned consciously are, yeah, I think the First Amendment is destructive, we're going after that, or it's a perception from the other side?
No, I mean, I was listening to interviews. They were definitely saying that, like, you know, we're combating misinformation, and it's like, well, what is misinformation? Is that just you calling truth or stuff that goes against what you're trying to have them believe? Is that misinformation?
Well, now a lot of they're not even calling it misinformation anymore. They're calling it malinformation, which isn't it. Misinformation when the information is wrong. Malinformation is information that goes against the rhetoric of the government.
No, I think there were so many people saying it that it was pretty clear they wanted to alter the First Amendment, and they wanted to put in a lot of caveats and amendments that, well, it's okay as long as this doesn't happen, or if it affects national security, if it affects national health.
The Constitution has been edited before.
Sure.
So what do you think? How come it's not appropriate now?
Like the domestic terrorist thing. It's, people have a right to trial unless they're domestic terrorists and they don't get a trial. Well, what's a domestic terrorist? Well, if you say vaccines are unhealthy, you're going against the health of the country. Well, that's kind of a stretch, don't you think? And what if I have irrefutable scientific evidence that this particular medicine is dangerous? Well, but that would dissuade people from seeking treatment. There's so many gaslighting rabbit holes you can go down to muddle the truth and selectively disseminate information. Nefarious intentions can be disguised with intellectual stuff very easily, and the only way to combat that is with more true information. Does that make it
is true?
Well, you have to like see a bunch of stuff. You have to take the scientific method to it. You have to see studies. You have to see the truth. You have to see data. You have to see undoctored data. And often it takes a lot of comparison of many sources.
Mm-hmm.
If I only get my news from one source, I'm kind of beholden to whatever they share with me. But if I have access to everything on the internet, everything there is, I can start making an informed decision.
And a lot of times, I don't think there is one defined truth, but having people that just have the ability to make that distinction on their own, I think that goes away if we take away freedom of speech. Being able to just listen to everything and make that decision on their own rather than being pushed one certain way because they don't want people to hear certain
things. Well, like, I mean, we were all alive during COVID when they started to silence certain doctors. And these weren't kooks, these weren't quacks. These were guys with 10, 20, 30 years in their field that were like distinguished PhDs that were presenting their findings, and then they were labeled misinformation agents and silenced and had their stuff banned and taken down, and have their voice silenced. And that's certainly not how you get to the truth.
Do you think the reporting on the election was truthful?
I think the polls are pretty inaccurate. I had a pretty strong intuition that it was going to be a Trump landslide. I think a lot of people did too.
So I'll tell you, I sat with a GOP pollster and a DNC pollster because I never even thought about how do these polls work.
Yeah,
it's not an easy business. He was explaining they'll send out 350,000 text messages and they'll get about 80,000 replies. Then they take that information and they plug it into these softwares that weigh it against past election results. And then it outputs, and then that's what we see in the news. And that's also who the campaigns are basing. Okay, where do we got to go? Who do we got to talk to? Where do we have to campaign? What do we have to campaign for? So it is, unless you see like ABC News and then on the bottom it's ABC's poll, that's complete whatever ABC wanted it to be. Insert mainstream network. But you see like other independent posting, their business model is being as accurate as possible, which I found interesting.
Yeah. Polls are interesting. They've shown that people will tend to vote with who they think is going to win. And which is ironic, even if they're not really into that person, they don't want to feel like they're on the losing team. And so polls can be very misleading if, you think, John Kerry's going to win. I was thinking about Bush, but I don't want to throw my vote away. And they can use polls to really steer public opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I really can't give my opinion on it because I didn't watch the polls. I mean, I didn't pay attention to them like building up to the election. I mean, I have my opinion, but I don't really keep up with it that much. Yeah.
I think polls are probably more beneficial to the campaign people themselves to find out what issues maybe are resonating with people and what groups are thinking a certain way. But beyond that, I think it's kind of one of these archaic things that's falling by the wayside as well.
Yeah, it's a tough business. It's a tough. I mean, I looked at the guy after. I'm like, so you're guessing, right? And he goes, it's an art and a science.
It's an educated guess.
It's right, but I mean, I've actually been polled once or twice. I've gotten some messages, and then it was too long and the questions got annoying, so I exited it.
Yeah.
I'm like, give me 2 questions, man. Like, get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was from the Kamala campaign. And so I put in what I put in, and then it started asking me these super leading questions, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like, stop. And, I bounced.
I do find it funny that so I've heard that they were planning on having a primary, and Biden kind of gave a fuck you to these people who kicked him out, and he just went ahead and said, I endorse Kamala. She's going to be great. And they didn't want him to do that. And then I found out that, or I read that his resignation letter, they posted that and then told him that, like, you're out.
Really?
Yeah. And so he's like, oh yeah, well, I still have some cards up my sleeve. And then he started kind of being the little saboteur from within, which I think is hilarious. There were so many dominoes that like started falling into place for this. And I think that was one of them,
I mean, people were commenting on how big of a smile was on Biden's face when
and he put on the MAGA hat and was like, "Look at me," photo op,
after when he invited Trump into the office and they discussed, his smile was like he looked either like he really had no idea where he was, but he was enjoying himself.
Yeah.
I
think that was like an art of war thing. Like, okay, so we got this guy that will kind of do and say anything. He's very power hungry. He might have a giant ego too. How can we use that to our favor? Oh, okay, well, I have a hunch there's probably so many backdoor phone conversations with Trump and Biden and these guys, and off the record stuff.
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you think the country's going to go moving forward? How do you think these next 4 years are going to be for us?
It's going to be very good for my business. I will say that. It's going to be hectic.
Why so? What's your next pursuit?
Well, we're figuring that out. We're figuring my team we're tracking Twitter, Reddit. Bluebird is the new one.
Is it Blue Sky or Bluebird?
Blue Sky. I think it's Blue Sky. I think it's Blue Sky. So I'm not doing that personally, but I have two guys that are tracking where anti-Semitism is happening. What's the sentiment on racism? What's the sentiment on Antifa? What rhetoric is there? What is January? Was it 15th or 16th? So tired.
I think 20th is when he gets sworn in.
What's the 20th? What's the inauguration going to look like? So we're trying to see if there's going to be anything interesting to cover there. So far, it doesn't seem like there's definitely going to be protests, but we haven't uncovered anything. Definitely not January 6th level. If you're of the belief that was organized by the Trump supporters themselves, and which, by the way, I met 3 people who told me that they were at January 6th, and they all had a consistent narrative that it was very peaceful, and they claimed one of them claimed that he saw what was like FBI, he's letting them in,
agent provocateurs. I'm really curious to see how Trump is going to handle the war in the Middle East or the upcoming conflicts. How do you see Trump intervening in those?
It's a good question. I definitely see a negotiation attempt. It's hard to say exactly, right? Because right now what we're seeing, we're currently seeing, is similar to, say, the last 10 seconds of a boxing match, where every round you hear the bell and you go all out, try to do as much damage as possible, gain as much advantage for the next as possible. So right now, they know, all the leaders know Trump is coming, and he's going to try to cut deals, and he's going to try to bring an end to this stuff because he kept his promises last time, especially when it came to foreign policy. And we're seeing it now. Hezbollah is ramping up their attacks. Israel's ramping up their attacks. Netanyahu even said if they agree to this ceasefire with Lebanon, they're still going to attack Hezbollah, which is just an interesting complexity. It's kind of funny. But we see the long-range missiles being handed to Ukraine. So things are going to heat up. We're going to have to see where the heck are we, because in warfare, a few months is a significant amount of time.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think Trump is going to try to bring an end to it. And Iran specifically confirmed, like, they didn't confirm, but it's known they tried to assassinate Trump. It was on the front cover, I believe, the Wall Street Journal. I saw it at my house in Maryland. I was just home. And I think that's something interesting to see how he's going to react to the fact that, to their understanding, Iran tried to do a personal attack on his life, and how is that going to skew his actions, right? Is it going to be cutting a deal? Is it going to be really going for their nuclear, for their oil? Is he going to do what he did last time, which is just chokehold them with sanctions,
Mm-hmm.
considering Russia's cooperation with Iran with weapons, oil. I see potential for some sort of deal between leveraging Putin's relationship with Iran to crush Iran financially and militarily, and through that cut a deal with Putin. Potentially, I see opening up back up that relationship probably means bringing them back into the global economy and releasing the sanctions of, let's say, you're going to stop dealing with Iran completely, and we're going to negotiate a land deal per se with Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the pieces that I see. I don't really have an opinion on what he's actually going to do, but my perception and the time that I have to analyze it, those are kind of the chess pieces I see. That's common public knowledge. Of course, there's lots of stuff that happens under the table. How much of it is going to come down to the fact that Trump and Putin for sure can just sit and have a laugh together. Their personality, it's like I think that I speculate they actually just enjoy each other's presence. How much that's going to play into how much Trump can negotiate is kind of an unknown, but I do think about that. But those are the main pieces I see moving around. China and Taiwan, I honestly don't know enough to even speculate. But Taiwan is important because of their conductor, the semiconductor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself going boots on the ground in Israel and doing some
So Israel
journalism
is
there?
always going to be a running story.
Mhm.
I live here. This conflict isn't going anywhere. People are not ready for peace here yet. Many on both sides.
Mhm.
I'm having an exceptionally hard time getting interviews with Palestinians,
Mm.
especially ones in Gaza, which is understandable, but
Yeah.
it shows where people are at. Yeah, Taiwan, I definitely see a possibility of being boots on the ground there. Definitely in Ukraine. I'm already talking with people in Ukraine. We want to get there. I'm gonna have to go do this thing called HEFAT training, hostile environment first aid training, and so I can get insurance. And military units will take me because I know what to do. I'm trained for it if shit goes down, and I'm not just like a dog and wide eyed.
Right.
And then other things we want to cover, things like the modern space race, the private space race, cover that. There's a lot going on outside of Elon and Bezos. So we want to uncover some of that. We want to dive into conservative Black America. And
Yeah, that's interesting, huh?
Yeah, we want to go investigate what the heck what's going. How did Barack Obama end up in a situation where he's lecturing men on what they should be doing? Like what's going on there? And why did that shift happen? And there's going to be a lot of just reacting to current events. Like there's no way to. Oh yeah, definitely immigration / deportation.
Mhm.
But we want to do it not at the border. We want to find everyone. Channel 5 with Andrew's going to be there. Every mainstream media is going to be there. Every independent journalist is going to be there. Our goal at R Squared Media is to educate, inform, inspire, and aspirationally, we want to mind fuck you. We want you to watch our content and go, holy shit, I didn't know that was a thing. That's fucking crazy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If I and then end up in the jungles of Vietnam with people that are at the top of where the illegal immigration actually happens, it's like, wait, I didn't know that was part of the story, right? We want to usher that in, go where other people aren't looking.
Oh, that'll be nice.
Yeah, I would love to see you. I would love to see you start poking into the child trafficking stuff too, with all these Diddy files being released and all these. I mean, it seems like we're uncovering all these like sick satanic ritual abuse type things.
Yeah, perhaps I brought it up. My partner said it's been covered enough, but maybe I need to push back on that. Maybe it's been a while. But yeah, that is a really
Well,
hot
sometimes
topic.
that's smart to see what everyone's saying and then find the piece that's not being talked about and go there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's wild stuff. That
I like
that
your
kind of
plan though. I'm excited to see some more of your stuff come out.
Yeah, I think you've chosen a great path, Nathaniel. I think you're going to do really well, and I think you're suited for this.
I appreciate that. It's been a lot of growth. I'm looking at my stuff already from a few months ago. I'm like, oh man, that was but
It's
it's
funny where life
wild.
takes you, huh?
It's funny, yeah. All the life experiences, the failures, the frustrations, and then the successes, things I learned that like put me in a position to get into this industry and seem to do it pretty smoothly has been um feels divine at times. It just kind of
Yeah.
like God put all these pieces in place, and my life went going in directions I didn't want it to go in, and I'm super happy because what drives me is the adventure for sure, the experiences. But what inspires me is uncovering these perspectives, these truths, and offering the audience uh, the opportunity to hold more than one perspective
Mm,
simultaneously. Because we want to be unbiased. You saw I'm everywhere.
Hmm.
So I have a trust in my audience's intelligence that I think the mainstream media has lost, that I can
Yeah.
present with conflicting information and you're going to make sense of it. Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
You can watch my video on immigration and go, wow, it's really heartbreaking that that guy who moved to America lives with four other dudes to wash dishes, sends
Hmm.
80% home so his grandma can have medication, is now his grandma's going to die.
Hmm.
But we can't be letting girls get raped and killed by other immigrants, right? Like you can,
Hmm.
but it's gonna hurt, right? We gotta show you that. And
Well,
then
no,
not every
very few issues are black and white. They're
yeah,
mostly shades of gray.
exactly. They're mostly shades of gray. So we want to black and white go together to create gray, right? So we got to bring both of those together, and we want to do some positive pieces on just cool things that are going on. Um, and that's like the space race. We're figuring out what it's going to be, but we want to do like an adventure story, and maybe
Hmm.
people that are exploring something in the jungle, or veterans that sail across the ocean to deal with post trauma, just something just kind of cool like that.
Yeah.
Well, Nathaniel, we really look forward to having you back and hearing about your adventures and your findings. And we'll post the links of your videos and stuff in the bio for the video.
Oh, I appreciate that.
What is the best place to reach you? I know your YouTube will have that. That's R squared reports, right?
There's R squared reports. There's Relentlessly Rogue, which is my personal Instagram, and
Nice.
then there's R2 Report on Instagram that we haven't started posting on yet, but we will in the near future. But
And you're
people
on X. What are you on X?
on X, I'll send it to you. I'm not active on X yet. I will be come January.
Okay.
I think it's also Relentlessly Rogue. I'm trying to everything is going to be something with two R's. It's Rogue underscore reporting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, Nathaniel, thanks again, brother. It was good talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.